Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is a budget meeting of the Third Laguna Hills Mutual Board of Directors, a California nonprofit mutual benefit corporation. This is Friday, August 13th, 2021, 9:30 a.m. We're in the boardroom, and also this is a virtual meeting. So the purpose of the meeting today, let me back up. We have a quorum here. So item one, item two, purpose of the meeting is to review the proposed 2022 business plan version 3. So at this time, I'd like to ask Chris, if you would, to tell people how they can connect with us if they would so choose.
Sure, Steve. Good morning, everybody. So if you'd like to participate in this meeting, you would call the following number. It is 1-669-900-6833, and you will use the meeting ID number 81-64-40-96-078 and press pound afterwards. If you'd like to speak in this meeting, feel free, if you're joining via Zoom, to raise your hand or send a message in the chat box to make sure that your questions are being addressed during member comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like to acknowledge the media at a distance here. And do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Steve,
Okay.
before you go further, can I request Chris to say these numbers again, because there's a lot of numbers. If people were not ready to write them, they would have missed it.
Sure.
So
Okay,
please
let's do that.
Thank you.
Sure, of course. So again, the phone number is 1-669-900-6833. And then when prompted, you use the meeting ID number 81-64-40-96-078, and then press pound. And then you'll be entering into the meeting as an attendee, and I'll see that you have joined via phone, and I'll make sure to get your questions addressed if you have any. And we'll be checking throughout the meeting as well.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Still on the approval of the agenda, who made the motion to accept? Okay, raise it. Second, Donna, okay. Chair's remarks. I want to give my heartfelt thanks to so many people that's helped us with this business plan. We changed a little bit on how we did it this year from previous year, and we had a lot of challenges we had to take into consideration and work. So thanks to staff, thanks to the board members, especially Robert here that spent a lot of time as treasurer with staff on this, and other people that gave contributions. So thank you so much on that. So that concludes my chair's remarks. Okay, open forum. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak? This is a one-time opportunity to speak on things not on the agenda.
So if anyone that is joining the meeting via attendee, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or to use the chat box to request to speak during member comments right now. I'll give you a moment.
Okay, we'll wait about 5 seconds, see if anything shows up here.
There are no requests to speak.
Okay, so moving on to item 7, no responses required. Item 8, no unfinished business I know of. Number 9, new business. Today we're going to be talking about the review of the third 2022 business plan, version 3. So I think, Jose, you're going to be taking the lead on this, is that correct?
I am. I'll be
Okay.
talking about that. Thank you very much, President. And I want to wish everyone a happy Friday the 13th. I'm glad to be with you today. Just want to make sure that we're being able to see everything online. Is that correct?
Yeah, people are saying that they can't see something.
So we're having a little bit of a technical issues to be able to see what you see on your screens on TV. So give us 1 second here to make sure everyone's up and ready. But while they're bringing that up, I just want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about where we've been. We call this version 3, and some people at home may be asking themselves what's going on. Just to let everyone out there know, we have been at this for many, many months. We started back in March, where we had our department heads come through and give everyone an opportunity to hear what it is that they do in their departments, so you can see all the services that are provided for you within the mutual. Additionally, we had specific landscape and maintenance meetings back in June where you were able to go line by line and take a look at those individual programs and make your comments and make your recommendations for any changes for 2022. After that, we took all that we had learned and we had put together and rolled it up and incorporated it into a complete budget where we presented that to you a couple of times, once in June and then again in July. So this is the culmination of all those meetings and all of your input that we've received, and we put it together here in this business plan here for you. So today we'll be having this televised meeting so we can go through it, and so everyone will go line by line so everyone can understand what's in the business plans, and then we'll roll up all these numbers and put them together for you in a resolution, and we'll submit it to you for final approval in April. If I can have slide 3, please. So first thing is I wanted to give some history as far as where we've been. The numbers that you see on your screen here are specific for third, so you can see the third basic assessment and what's been happening with it. As you see, from 2021 to 2022, the proposed budget is set to increase $93 per man or per month. We've been talking about it time and time again, but this is all a result of our insurance market. Having to go to higher insurance premiums because of both higher coverage and the actual rates themselves have increased. The total increase on this is actually $98, but we found a couple of different offsets to be able to bring this back down. Well, we had to really because of your statutory maximum. The statutory maximum was 20% or $93, so that is where we are. It's a $93 increase for third business plan. Additionally, there were some changes in compensation. Compensation increased $717,000 or $9.80 per man or per month due to the addition of some FTEs or full-time equivalents, and we'll talk about those in just a second.
Jose, stop. I'm sorry, people are saying that there's no audio coming through on Zoom, so give me a moment and then we'll continue for a second.
Okay, we'll pause for just a second.
Sorry about that.
So at this point, we are resetting Zoom altogether, so it will be just a brief minute here. What about on TV? Do we know anything about TV?
No.
Forgive me.
She's virtual.
She's virtual? Okay.
But again, I think we're resetting everything, so she might get kicked off for a minute. We should be rejoining shortly.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. If you are the meeting host, please enter your host key followed by pound. If you are a participant, please press pound to continue. You entered 718977. This host key is invalid. Please re-enter your host key followed by pound. Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by
And you have audio? Perfect. Okay, thank you.
enter your participant ID followed by pound. You have entered the meeting as a panelist. Attendees can now hear you speak.
Hi, Lynn, it's Chris. Can you guys hear me now? If anyone can hear me, please type in the chat that you guys can hear now.
All right, Steve says that he can hear you. Okay,
Perfect, okay.
perfect. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Some technical difficulties there, but just wanted to make sure that everyone's able to hear us from home. And as I understand, they're able to watch us on TV as well. So, good. If you can, if you can share the screen, please.
Okay, we're going ahead, and just a reminder, if people would turn off their electronic devices, please, that would help. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, so we just got done talking about some of the business plans and some of the per man or per months here, the history for third. I just reviewed that the increase from 2020 to 2021 was $93, primarily due to insurance. If we can have the next slide, please. In addition to that, GRF reviewed their budgets. They took a look at their business plan on Monday, and ultimately they agreed to a $12.21 increase, and that had to do, again, with rising insurance premium costs for them, as well as increased compensation. However, there was an offset that GRF experienced. There was some operating surplus that they experienced in 2020, and that was used to reduce the 2022's assessment. So ultimately, again, the increase for GRF is $12.21 for a grand total of $105.21 in the total basic assessment for third. So $777.43, as you see there on your screen.
Is the GRF budget finalized?
It's just like yours here. They went through it today or Monday for their version 3. They didn't recommend any changes, so those are the numbers that we're going to be putting forth.
No, I just want to make sure that people, there is some confidence in this number or there might change. That's the reason I'm asking.
Thank you.
So there is a good confidence in it.
Yes, thank you. All right, on this next slide here, we'll talk about some full-time equivalents. So I wanted to give you an idea of what's been going on with staffing. So this is staffing for the last several years. And you can see that in 2013, we were at 772 staff years. For 2022, it's 734. And I do want to point out that from last year, this year, meaning 2021 to 2022, there was an increase of 6.33 staff years. And on the next slide here, we will talk about where those increases were and what we're attaining from them. Starting off here with the Office of the CEO. On your screen, you can see 2 columns, the 2021 plan and the 2022 plan, as well as a comparison. And we're talking again about full-time equivalents. The Office of the CEO had an increase of 1.44 staff years, and that had to do with the addition of a new senior management analyst position. And this is a position that's going to be used to conduct additional audits and take a look at some of the analytical capabilities within the Office of the CEO. Additionally, there was a part-time position that was eliminated and replaced by a full-time community services supervisor, and the idea there is going to be to focus on priorities on enhancing customer service and making more information available to residents. Media and communications saw a decrease of 1.68 staff years, having to do with the removal of an unstaffed cable technician. And information systems had an increase of 1.2 staff years, primarily due to a customer service manager added to resident services administration. So there will be closer management, and if residents have any needs, there will be a manager there to help out with that. General services saw an increase of 2 staff years, having to do with 2 paving trade aids that were added for streets and sidewalks. And financial services, on your screen there, you can see that there's no net change. However, I'll make the board aware that we're moving our risk manager from financial services over to human resources. The offset is that financial services is also getting the addition of an executive assistant, so we can free up some analyst time to conduct more of those ad hoc analyses. Security services saw a decrease of 1.13 staff years, having to do with efficiencies resulting from inspections or associated with inspections, I should say. And on the next slide, you'll see landscape here. Landscape had an increase of 1. They added a spray tech so we can provide better pest control. Recreation services, although it didn't affect third directly, this was having to do with GRF, of course. For the 2021 budget, because of COVID, we assumed that the clubhouses would be open for 10 months. However, for 2022, we're going to assume that we're going to be fully open, so we'll be open for all 12 months. The difference there is you're going to see the need for more staff to staff at those extra 2 months, so that's the addition of the 2.5 staff years that you see on your screen. Human resources, again, there's no net change. This is the reflection of the risk manager coming over from financial services to human resources, and maintenance and construction. And here, I'll say that there is no net change for maintenance and construction. However, the mix of employees changed quite a bit. As you know, MNC is undergoing quite a bit of organizational changes. So, for example, they added a deputy director to help with maintenance operations. There was also several operations specialists that were included. They're going to help out in areas of maintenance services, damage restoration, and also manor alterations. And we even added another inspector for that position. All of that was offset by the decrease of some painters, having to do with United actually reducing their paint program from 10 years to 15 years. Third had already done that for the 2021 budget, so you didn't experience that decrease, but United did. So altogether, there was an increase of 6.33 staff years community-wide.
Mr. President, can I ask a question on the staff?
And do you want questions as we go or later?
Do you take question now?
Sorry.
Do you want questions now or do you want them later?
Sure, we can take them now.
Okay, go ahead, Rita.
Okay, and the 734, that's the total estimated staff. Do we know the openings versus actual staff on the job? Because that's going to impact as we go forward with the labor market.
That's a full-time equivalent if we were fully staffed. That's not the vacancies that we have right now.
Oh, so 734 is fully staffed.
Right, that's
FTEs.
if you're fully staffed.
Okay.
I did want to, go ahead, Kush.
No, finish your thing.
No, I was going to make two comments with regards to the manpower slides that have been presented. The first one was I wanted to make a comment as to the community services, general services, the two positions that we're increasing there. That is related, even though it says the Department of Streets and Sidewalks. Really, what this is the gutter cleaning program, and we reduced the gutter cleaning contract that we've always used contract. And now what we're going to do is we're going to continue the contract to do the multi-story buildings. So we'll still have under contract, but these two additional positions will be taking over the responsibilities of the single level gutter cleaning. And it's actually a reduction simultaneously in the contract that offsets the cost of the employees. But we noted that we're adding 2 employees, but we're doing it in a cost-efficient manner by reducing the contract that you just recently signed. So it's good news for the organization. We're adding a couple people. We think we can be more efficient on the single-story gutter cleaning and by reducing the contract that we currently have had in the past. So that's a positive. On the other note, I wanted to mention in the Office of the CEO is mentioned that we have proposed a senior management analyst. I mentioned this to Mr. Parsons yesterday, is at the United meeting. The United board, in deciding to cut their budget, one of the specific dialogues that we brought up, and it originated from United, was the desire to have some internal management audits and wanting to look at that position. They no longer want to fund that position. Since they were the driver in that scenario, that is something for the board to consider, whether or not you want to continue to have that in the budget. It was really a driver in trying to address a lot of their issues that came up. So I just want to put that on the table, because if as an impact, if we were to move forward with going forward with the position, then the cost of that position would be borne by Third and GRF, because United was not going to fund that position.
Steve,
Hold
Jeff,
Hold on.
I watched that meeting yesterday. I watched the whole thing. And while there certainly were questions raised about that position, unless there was some discussion afterward that I wasn't privy to, at least in the open part of that meeting, they raised questions about it, but I didn't hear in the end that they cut it. I heard in the end that they asked you and the finance staff to come up with additional cuts that would reduce their monthly HOA increase, reduce it by $10. So that wasn't necessarily a requirement that that analyst position go away,
It-
unless
it
I
was-
missed something.
It wasn't a specific requirement, but we did have additional dialogue with regards to if they don't want, the position, and the majority of them indicated that they didn't want that position to be placed there, so certainly that's where we're going to meet their obligation of cutting $10. So at this point in time, the majority did not want us to move forward with that. So it's certainly going to come as a recommendation to me that if they don't want to have that auditing service, then we're not going to recommend to them that they fund it unless they want that.
Okay.
This is a service level that we were increasing because they had desired it.
Okay,
But that's not going to cut their $10 a month. I mean,
Well, no, it's only part of it.
That's a
It's
small-
just a
small
minor-
part of it.
Minor dollar for dollar. I got to
okay, Kush?
Thanks. So this budget that we are setting up is for 2022, so starting January 1, correct?
correct.
So all the new additions will happen in 2022, correct?
Correct, and as full-time part of our organization, yes.
Okay. So my question about this recreation that we are planning to add, we're going to add new staff in 2022, these people that we have on our screen. But currently, to get the whole recreation department up and running, we are still adding some more staff right now.
Right.
Correct.
If I can clarify there, 2021 was only budgeted for 10 months, meaning we were budgeted fully staffed starting March. So we didn't budget anything for January and February.
Right.
So we're
So-
going to continue at that level for all of 2022.
So bear with me, I'm kind of getting somewhere.
Sorry.
Right now, the COVID infections are like a seesaw, going up and down. Right now, it's on the uptick. So there may be a possibility that we may not open everything. So all this that we are doing will remain on paper, but may not be implemented. So if we don't use up all these positions, we'll still have the money but not spent. Would that be right?
That
to
is
assume?
correct. That is correct, and if that were to occur, then that surplus would be rolled into the contingency for, in most cases, GRF, because especially in recreation, it's GRF's budget.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands what we are doing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide, if that's okay here. On this slide here, I wanted to present what the difference was from the last time we met together to now that we're meeting together, so the difference from version 2 to version 3. The only difference here is going to be, well, there's two changes. One, that expenses increased. They increased by $1.82, and that had to do with premiums for insurance. Your earthquake premiums came in back a lot higher than expected, and they weren't available for version 2, so for version 3, we made that change. The total change there was $1.82, and then there was an offset here under restricted contributions. But Robert?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to at least share with the public about the earthquake insurance. Previously, we had paid for our earthquake insurance $198,000 per year for our policy. When we went back into the market this year, our policy was up August 1. So we had to renew for August 1. That's why the change now in the budget at this moment in time, because we only just recently got in the figures for the new earthquake policy. The earthquake policy originally, I said, was $198,000 this year, but the quote for next year went to $421,000. We went back out into the market and tried to find a better rate than the $421,000. The best we could find for the same coverage was $309,000. So an increase of 50% just in the earthquake insurance policy alone from this year to next year. And that's why the big increase at this moment in time.
Thank you, and that just goes to underscore that you guys know, you guys are on the board, but the board is working very hard to continue to keep those insurance minimum to a minimum. I understand that there's a big increase, and you guys understand that there's a big increase, but I feel that the community should understand that you've been doing everything that you can and continually pressing your vendors to come up with the best possible coverage at the most reasonable prices. So that's an example of the board getting involved and having that insurance premium come down a little bit there. So I wanted to point that out. So the total difference then from version 2 to version 3, again, is at $1.82. Again, we needed to keep within that $93 statutory maximum. So that came out of the contribution to the restricted fund, to your disaster fund, at $1.82. Additionally, GRF decreased, and that's out of your purview here, but just so the board knows, GRF decreased from version 2 to version 3 by 29 cents. So that's what you see there on your screen. On the next slide here, there were no changes in surcharges. And I just wanted to point out there were no changes in surcharges between version 2 and version 3. Next slide. On this slide here, this is the total business plan in a nutshell, if you will. You'll be able to, we'll talk about each of these categories individually, but it's made up of revenue, and we're anticipating more revenue for 2022 than we did in 2021, and that'll decrease your assessment by $2.10. We're also anticipating more expenses, primarily driven by that insurance number. The total increase in expenses is $106.71, as you can see there. So the subtotal, if you will, the net operating increased to $104.61, and that number was, there was no change to your reserve contributions. And restricted contributions, this is your contribution to your disaster fund, and also to your UEF, your unappropriated expenditures fund, came down $11.61. And again, we'll talk about each of those there, but you can see this is how we arrive at that $777 number and 43 cents. And we'll talk about each of these categories individually here. On the next slide here, you'll see the total surpluses. I apologize, surcharges. These are the surcharges for matters specific with laundry revenue. You'll see expenses equal revenue, so there will be no net change there. Elevator operating is increasing by a penny, and Garden Villa Rec Room Fund is increasing by 25 cents per manor per month. So let's take a look at non-assessment revenue. For this category, again, we're anticipating more revenue than we had in 2021, primarily due to higher permit fees revenue. And this has to do with manor alteration staff that we described in M&C. We're submitting that there'll be a lot more, there'll be 3 more positions for manor alteration staff, and that's gonna give them an opportunity to process permits, and that's gonna yield some more revenue from you. So there'll be partial offset to those increased staff. But let's take a look at some of the individual items. So as far as revenue is concerned, Third has $1.7 million in total non-assessment revenue. You can see the pie chart there. Primarily, the biggest contributor is the chargeable services, $785,000, as you can see on your screen there, followed by processing fees, laundry income, resale processing fees, and golf electric fees, resident violations, late fees. And in the miscellaneous category, you have collection administration, recycling, and legal, and the variance processing fees. So let's talk about each of those categories here. We'll start with fees and charges. And again, this is chargeable services. So as you can see that we're anticipating $112,000 more revenue in 2022 than we did 2021. And that's due, again, to higher permit fees due to the added staff who will be able to process a higher level of permit fees. And also to asbestos cleanup, we're making sure that the monies that we're spending on alterations, dealing with asbestos, is being charged back to those residents that have those alterations. Laundry, we're anticipating a little bit less revenue for laundry, and that's just based off of prior years' experience. So we were a little too optimistic there for laundry in 2021, so we're bringing it back down to some of the previous year's levels. There's no change in unrealized gain or loss, and that continues to be at 0. But as far as miscellaneous fees, the decreased revenue, in other words, sorry, more revenue was due to resale processing fees as home sales are trending upward. So we're anticipating that the home sales will continue to go in a positive trajectory there. And as more sales come in, you'll get some more processing revenue that comes from that. So altogether, there's $125,000 more revenue planned in 2022 than in 2021, decreasing the assessment by $2.10. Next area here is expenses, and I'll keep going if there's no questions on revenue. All right, we'll keep going. Moving on to expenses. Total operating expenses increased by $784,000 or $106.71 per man or per month. On the next slide here, you'll be able to see a pie chart that shows where these expenditures lie. As you know, yours is a service organization, so the biggest factor here is employee compensation. That's $11 million or 37% of all operating expenses, followed very closely by insurance. Insurance is a total of $9 million or 30% of operating expenses. And next up is utilities at almost $6 million or 20% there. And you can see the rest of them trickling on there on your screen. Net mutual allocations, operating services, and materials and supplies. On the next slide here, we'll talk about each of these individually, and I probably should have pointed out, and I apologize that I neglected to do so. On all these charts, you're going to be able to see 3 years of actuals. Sorry, one more chart forward. On these charts, you'll be able to see 3 years worth of actuals to give yourself an idea of where our spending has been historically, as well as last year's plan and the proposed 2022 plan. So that way you'll be able to see a full 5 years of history and also the proposal. And you'll see what that means for your assessment, if the assessment increased or decreased, and we'll talk about each of those reasons why. So for example, employee compensation, this area increased $459,000, and that has to do with, and I'll give this to you 2 different ways. One is the where did it happen? 258,000 of this happened in M&C, and again, while headcount remained the same, 7 positions were removed from predominantly reserve work centers, and they were replaced with some of those operating work centers. Again, we have pointed out some of the revenue that you were able to capture from permits and inspections, for example. Jeff talked a little bit about the gutter cleaning and how you're able to benefit from that as well. But we're just taking them line by line. We acknowledge that employee compensation increased in this particular area in M&C, $258,000. In landscape, it increased $66,000, primarily due to planned wage adjustments. Of course, all those guys are union. And there's also an increase in labor hours for irrigation systems checks. The way the budget currently sits right now, $61,000 were increased out of the Office of the CEO, having to do primarily with that added position, and that may be removed as we're hearing today. And $47,000 was increased in general services, again, primarily due to the added positions to deal with the gutter cleanup. But another way to take a look at these same employee compensation is what happened, if you will. Altogether, the 6 added positions that affected, well, there were 6 added positions community-wide, but of those that affected third, $272,000 resulted from added positions. $71,000 resulted from the 2.5% non-union wage adjustments. $72,000 came about from the union contracted wage adjustments. So that's what happened with employee compensation. A similar story in expenses related to compensation that went up $260,000, having to do with increase to non-union medical. Just so you know, as part of the contract, that particular line increased 10% or $75,000. Similarly, union medical also increased by a total of $83,000. Union retirement increased $43,000. Again, we focus on the wage increase of 2%, but there are some other lines in there in the contract, and that total increase actually equates to almost 12% for the union retirement, or $43,000. The next line here is materials and supplies.
Can I ask you just a question?
Please.
Jeff, you want to talk a little bit about the minimum wage effect?
So the state of California passed legislation 3 years ago, which took the minimum wage up $1 each year. So as of January 2021, it went to $14, and as of January 22, which you're reviewing right now, the budget, our minimum wage will go to $15. There is also a requirement for non-union positions that their minimum wage has to be in certain categories double the minimum wage. So if they were like at $28 an hour, then they have to go to $30 an hour because the minimum wage is going to 15. So there are some positions that fall into that category as well. So I don't know if we have the specific number on our minimum wage impact.
The majority of that, to be honest with you, affected GRF because you would assume that the minimum wage has to do with the recreation and actually a lot of security. So the majority of the impact was GRF, so it was not as heavy, 2/3 directly.
You mentioned the union wages for the minimum, but that also impact the non-union when your minimum wage goes to 15. People that are in position, for example, at 15, they're still going to get rate increase because that goes above the minimum wage because you cannot keep them at the minimum wage. Is that correct? What happens to the non-union people or staff here?
Yeah, it does. So in certain categories, of the non-union, they would get bumped. They're the ones that I mentioned
Yeah.
that would, if they're at
They'd get
28, that they would have to go to 30 because of that requirement that you're doubling that number. And we've seen that impact in the last 3 years as we progressed. And as Jose said, the biggest impact clearly is on GRF because most of the employees are under that category, especially with recreation and those type of activities. But it also in security, our gate ambassadors, all of those have to be at the minimum wage. So there is an impact there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, materials and supplies here. Some good news here. This decrease,
Jose, can I just interject again?
please.
Chris, one of our board members is on virtual.
Yes.
Could you watch if she has any questions also?
Yes, she has not put anything in the chat box or raised her hand.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Materials and supplies decreased by $53,000, and this is primarily in landscape. What's going on over there is they're planning to use less fertilizers for turf maintenance. So you see the decrease there. And cost of goods sold, there's no change. It's been zero for a few years. On the next slide here, we'll talk about some utilities. I want you to know that electricity increased by $8,000 due to the anticipated rate increases. Historically, they raised their rates by about 8%. Believe it or not, they raise the rates multiple times a year. Fortunately, if you take a look at your actuals, we were already trending a little bit upwards. So the total dollar amount here is an $8,000 increase, but I did want to make you aware that we take a look at 3 years of usage, and then we apply the current rates. And then not an inflationary factor, but an experience factor that we've seen that they continue to raise the rates. Sewer, on the other hand, increased by $55,000. And what happened here is on July 1st, El Toro Water District put out their new rates, and they have both a capital and an operating blended rate that they do. The bottom line is that sewer increased by 5.1%. So we're anticipating that will also continue on into the following year. So again, sewer is a fixed cost. You already know how many sewer pipes you have and those kinds of things. So that's a pretty solid number, meaning we're pretty consistent on hitting those. It's a $55,000 increase for sewer. Water increased also based off of a 5-year history. We take a look at history of usage and see where we are there. The water rate is a blended rate. As you know, they have a tier system, and so they put out new rates for those tiers, but the bottom line increase is going to be about a 4.1%. Based off of the new rates that just came out July 1st. So using our 5-year history and that new rate, that equates to a $125,000 increase for water. Trash increased $91,000, and this has to do with new legislation that is being proposed right now. It's SB 1383, and essentially it makes our trash providers deal with recycling a little bit differently. They're going to have different bins and that they're going to require to be used. Anyway, it's going to cost them a lot more money to process it. So unfortunately, they're passing on those costs to the users. So they are currently in negotiations with the city, and the city has reached out to us and recommended that we increase our rates by 20% in our budgets. Robert has a question?
Not a question, just to speak to that. My understanding is, correct me if I'm wrong, that Waste Management, the current company that does the trash hauling for us, has decided that it no longer wants to participate in the new requirements. So we're going to be getting a new trash hauler for us, and we'll most likely probably have at least 3 bins rather than 2 bins, since we can no longer put food wastes in the current trash situation. And it has to be separate so that it can be sent to a digester. And that's the reason I understand Waste Management no longer wants to participate. Is that accurate information?
It is accurate relative to the current contract. What they were in the last couple of years of their current waste management contract, and to continue that contract, they felt that they didn't have the financial wherewithal to continue the contract as it now serves and meet the obligations necessary to roll out the 1383 obligations. So the city, in evaluating that and how to determine that process, decided to go out and rebid the whole activity. It's our understanding that Waste Management is going to submit a bid with regards to that, which is a good news because they know the village, obviously. But I think it's a redo in the sense because this obligation that's coming through from the state kind of wasn't really addressed in the old contract, because most of the waste management contracts generally are 5 to 7 years. So if you signed a contract 5 years ago and said you're going to operate this year, but now all of a sudden the state throws in a new wrinkle into that, I don't think it was calculated in their fee structure and how they were revenue based. So we anticipate that process has been underway by the city. We have been asked to participate by having a board member from Third, like Mr. Wayne, to participate in evaluating some of that information that comes through to see whether or not there are some activities that maybe we can modify in the village that we don't need as much in order to keep these costs down. We just don't know exactly what the costs are going to be until these bids come in. And that's obviously the daunting part. But we wanted to make sure, given our conversation with the city, that we at least get 20% built in there based on what they're seeing from other cities that have already moved ahead with these food waste sourcing requirements under 1383.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, when this thing going to be implemented? I mean, we have how much time? Is it next year?
This year, yeah, in 2022, yeah.
What about the infrastructure? I mean, how they pushing this thing so quickly? Where are they going to take it for the disposal? This thing already in place? That people going to take it to these places?
Yes, so there are 2 different mechanisms, and that's why the bid process is the companies that are in the waste hauling business have been, knowing that this was coming down the pipeline, have looked at different avenues to address this waste stream and not put it in the landfills. Primarily what they do is it's called a digester, which basically converts it to gas by eating it up. They do it differently though, and that's part of this bid process. How are they going to do it? How far do they have to haul this stuff to those pieces of equipment are all going to play into what that cost really looks like. Because none of these waste hauling companies are going to build a digester for just Laguna Woods or just Irvine or just the various cities. So they're going to look at where is this thing sited. A number of them have sited out in the Inland Empire, so that means they got to haul this stuff further, so that's an additional cost. But I do know that in a couple of cases, and especially one of the anticipated bidders, that they already have the digester operating. Yes.
No, they do have a digester operator, but it's not that common in the whole area. They were very limited quantity, very limited capacity, and they also supposed to generate energy. I think we should ask for money back if they generate energy, because somehow they sell that, even in methane gas, they use it. It's so sudden. I mean, I don't think we expected this gonna be this year. That's what I was asked question. I thought that they're gonna give us some time to deal with this. Because a lot of things need to be done in the community to get people to separate waste. We still have problem with the regular, separation of the waste, and now we're adding another one to it. And what I heard, that they're gonna be penalties if it's not done right. And how we're gonna get the community ready for that such a short time.
And that is a very big challenge, which is why the city asked to have a representative from each of the boards to be a part of that dialogue. And I just do want to make a statement, I think it's a good point, is that with how are they going to facilitate the bin requirements? And all of the haulers, we worked with the city to allow those interested in submitting bids. They did a tour of the village, took them around, and so they have a good idea, and certainly Waste Management has a very good idea because they've been providing that. But how do you create that space for the additional bin? How is that going to be addressed with regards to the different styles of manners that we have? That is a challenge that's going to be coming at us for sure, and them especially.
Okay, onward.
Perfect. On this next slide here, we can see legal fees. Legal fees are going to increase $27,000. The budget for legal fees will increase $27,000, as you can see here. And this is a contingency budget and varies based on experience and different projects that are going on. However, as you can see, the fees are trending upwards, so that's how we came up with the $27,000 increase. Professional fees remained relatively flat, and to give you an idea, that does include the audit and tax preparation, as well as contingencies for lobbying and different professional fees here that you have. Equipment rental is a pretty small budget at $7,000. It's an increase of $2,000, and included in there is some carpentry services to be able to re-rent any specialty equipment that we don't have on hand. Outside services had a big decrease of $437,000, and it's mainly due to the reduction of fumigation programs. And what ended up happening is that 2021 budget was, going back to 2020, obviously COVID was going on. So in 2021, the budget was increased to account for some of those buildings that weren't done in 2020. And 2022 here is normalization, if you will, of those. There was a slight offset that we did increase the budget $90,000 to fund the budget for asbestos removal, the P5 removal as they call it. So $90,000 was included in the budget that wasn't previously there. And again, Jeff talked about it earlier, but general services had the gutter cleaning program is moved to be done in-house, and I should say more specifically the lower buildings or the things that's less dangerous, if you will, are going to be done by in-house staff, and we'll let the professionals deal with the tall ones. Not that our staff isn't professional, but you know what I mean. The contracted services is what I meant. Repairs and maintenance decreased by $2,000, and to give you an idea, this is primarily due elevator lift maintenance. That's primarily what's in this budget here. Elevator lift went down just a little bit. On the next slide here, you see other operating expenses, a small increase of $8,000, and some of the major categories in here include uniforms, postage, and that's what's in here, $65,000 in uniforms and $54,000 in postage is the majority of this. There is no change for the assumption for income taxes. It continues to be zero. And the biggest reason we're here really is insurance. You see on your screen here, a $7.2 million increase. And I would just remind everyone that 2021 included, what's not in here is that the 2021 plan, that's what was funded out of the operating fund. But in addition to that, $2.1 million was paid from the disaster fund. So really the 2021 budget was $4 million. It's still a sizable increase, but Robert has, I'm sure, some to help me out here.
I would to respond to you. Actually, the 2021 plan, we spent $4.9 million total on all of our insurances. So the 1.805 that's in there was what we proposed in the original 2021 plan. But remember too, we went from, in that year, last year, from $700 million evaluation for the community to $3.4 billion evaluation. And that then unexpectedly, we didn't know it was going to happen, unexpectedly drove our insurance premiums up so dramatically. That's why the $1,805,000 that was budgeted was way out of line. We wound up spending $4.9 million. And that's why, and now with the rate increases for this year, that's why we're at the $9 million proposed for this year.
Absolutely. And so just to clarify there, that property valuation here does assume a $1.5 billion coverage just for third. And in addition to that, with everything going on, well, the wildfires, with any reason that the insurance company can come up with, the rates have increased. So you got a double whammy there. You got a higher rate, and we're covering a lot more.
And just so you know, I mean, I'm sure every homeowner who has an HO6 policy, if you've been getting a renewal recently, you'll notice that that has also gone up dramatically. For example, my mother-in-law, who lives in the towers, just got her renewal, and her renewal went up 50% on her HO6 policy.
That insurance tightening market is being experienced everywhere. So that's pretty tough. Just so everyone knows, that insurance does include property insurance, hazard and liability, D&O, and earthquake. So that's what's in there. On this next slide here, you'll see the net allocations to mutuals that remained unchanged, and that's just the result of intercompany allocations. So for example, HR or vehicle maintenance, they take some of their costs and pass it on to some of the other departments, and that's what you see here on your screen. Uncollectible accounts, we decreased this based on recent trends and some collection that we've experienced, so $10,000 decrease there. So overall, operating expenses increased by $7.8 million. Again, insurance was 7.2 of that, employee compensation 720,000 of that. So that was it for expenditures. On the next slide here, we'll talk about reserve contributions. The reserve contributions are anticipated to remain steady at $152 per man per month. On this next slide here, we'll show you the contracted reserve study. So Third does engage a reserve specialist to come on site and actually to do a reserve study. They come on site once every 3 years, and we're anticipating that to take place next year. But they've taken the information that your staff has gone out and observed and created a plan for the next 30 years. And the purpose of this plan is to provide what's required by law, and what's required is that we show a percent funding. And what this does is it compares the money that you have available to you in your reserve account, and it compares that against the current full funding reserve balance. And that means that's their estimate of what you should have in the bank to account for your expenditures over the next 30 years. Taking that ratio there, it comes out that Third is 37% funded. And they have a little scale here across the bottom to show you what that may mean. And they believe, according to their little scale here, it's if you're under 30% funded, then you would be considered at high risk for a special assessment. And between 30 and 70, you're considered to be medium risk, and over 70%, you're considered low risk. I will remind the board that this is the same metric that's used for homeowners associations throughout the United States. And there are very few homeowners associations the size of ours. So it's kind of difficult for us to compare ourselves. But nevertheless, being 37% funded does put you in that medium risk category, which is, to give some history here, we have historically been in the teens. So we're working our way to become better funded here at 37%. On this next slide here, you'll see what the plan is. So this is the reserve specialist plan. And in the middle there, you can see reserve contributions, what they assume that the reserve contributions should be year over year. And right there next to that color bar chart, it says the percent funding. You can see that that's the plan that they have established for us to continue to grow and to get to that 100% funding mark. So again, 37% funding now. This is the general plan. And of course, this is something that the board approves 1 year at a time.
Does this take into consideration the revaluation in different years?
It does. It takes into consideration both that as well as inflation and interest on your money earned. Next slide, please. They have given us two different plans. Sorry, that first one was the optimum plan, and the second one is more along the lines of what we're currently doing, just to make your contribution rates a little bit less. But what would be the most important would be the column all the way over on the right, and that is, I apologize, the column on the left will show us what the balance is. And so you'll see that even if we take this less conservative approach here, you'll see that even in the lowest years, you'll be at $8 million in your reserve, in your reserve balances. So you'll still have some money there available to you should you follow this particular plan. And again, the committee approves 1 year funding at a time. And in light of what's going on with insurance, the reserve specialist agreed that there would be that it would be prudent to continue and to maintain your $152 contribution. If you can go back 2 slides, please. Sorry, what I should have mentioned here on this slide is the third number from the bottom there. The recommended 2022 annual funding contributions is $13 million. The reserve specialist said, hey, if we're working our way towards 100% funding, you should contribute $13.2 million. He said, however, if you want to continue to keep your contributions to where your reserves will stay at a minimum, currently $8.3 million, if you're going to keep at least $8.3 million, you can continue to fund it at your current rate of $11,130, or in other words, $152 per man or per month. So he provided both of those, so he can feel good about himself. Hey, how do you get to 100? But more realistically, the second one is what it's still a good plan. It's still one that keeps you above your threshold of $8.3 million. And that's the reason that he also found that to be an alternate acceptable plan. So that's what you saw there. Can you go forward 2 more slides? 1 more. So this is how the $152,000 breaks down. You'll see that $10.6 goes into the replacement fund, $366,000 goes into elevator, and $73,000 goes into laundry, for again a total of that $11.1 million. And the purpose of all these funds is to provide for the repair, restoration, replacement, or maintenance of structural elements and mechanical equipment within the mutual. And of course, the same thing can be said for elevator and laundry. Next slide. So here's a cash flow statement, if you will. So if we continue to put in $146,000 to the replacement fund, you'll see that your total contribution in 2022 will be 10.7. You'll also gain some interest here. And the planned expenditures that are currently in your plan are $10.3 million, resulting in an ending balance of $15 million. And again, you can see that those ending balances continue to be maintained for the next several years there on your screen. Next slide. Here's that same chart shown in a different way. We have 30 years to account for, so I just showed you the first few and the bottom few. Again, the board currently employs threshold funding, meaning you have set a standard that you said that you didn't want your balances to fall below. The lowest that this particular one gets in the replacement fund is in year 2023. Your threshold is $7 million. And you can see that if we go according to the plan here, you'll still have 14 million, well above that threshold number. On the next slide here, you'll see a pictorial representation of the same thing here. Here's the reserve balances in that solid line, and in that dotted line is that threshold. So at any given year, you can see that you're above that threshold. Over the next couple of slides here, you'll see the same thing
ask a
for
question?
elevator.
Question?
Go back to slide 27. Can you explain the interest calculation there? I'm a little bit confused.
Sure. The interest calculation is we take your average fund balances and thank you for pointing this out. I apologize. This is actually different than the agenda that you were provided. In 2022, as you can see, there was a steep drop-off, and what's going on there is that the market is very tough out there. There's no real vehicle where you can put in your money that you're going to be getting any meaningful return. So you can see that that's decidedly lower. For 2021, we used the current what you had made up year to date, and we extrapolated that, and that's the number that we had provided to the reserve specialist before engaging. The board has recently engaged a new bank to put in their investments, and they'll be voting that at their next board meeting, as I understand.
If I can help clarify some of that. The reason it's $17,882 is that beginning in the next couple of months, we're going to be moving our investments, and this will, exactly as Jose referred, it's coming up on Tuesday at the board meeting. We're going to be closing our account with Sageview, moving our money over to a California bank, and moving our money into guaranteed investments. But because they're guaranteed, they're extremely low, and therefore the actual interest. But what we'll be saving is also, I would just say it this way, we're moving from paying Sageview 7 basis points to now earning a minimum of 12 basis points on our investment. So it'll be a turnaround of 19 basis points, but it'll actually be a positive of about $17,000, $18,000 next year on this account. Okay, but total on all our accounts will be approximately $30,000 in income.
Correct.
Well, the 23, 24 will all be changed dependent upon how we proceed in the future.
We're hoping that the skies will get sunnier, but for now, the assumption is a 2% return, which we found that was relatively conservative, but again, today that would be a pipe dream, right? So that would be extremely high today. So if the board feels so inclined, we can change that assumption, but over the long term, over the next 30 years, we needed to put an assumption down. We felt that 2% was reasonable for the long term. On the next slide, we'll see the same story being told, one more, for the elevator fund, which is next. So the elevator fund here, you'll see the same thing. You'll see a lower interest rate for 2022. You'll see a $5 contribution. And again, over on the right-hand side, your ending balance. And as you can see, over the next 5 or so years, there really isn't too much of a dramatic change in your balances. There's a little bit of an increase. On the next slide here, you'll see, again, where it gets the lowest here is 2023 at 2.6%. Your threshold there is $640,000 in 2023, so well above that. Or pictorially, on the next slide, you'll see that the reserve balances in any given year maintain themselves above the threshold. You can see there. Elevators, sorry, if you go back one more. Elevators is more spiky, I'm going to call it. All of a sudden you see some bigger drops, and that's because when you do have to replace an elevator, as you would imagine, those are some pretty significant expenses. So that's what you see there. And lastly, laundry room. You'll see, again, the same story being told here. $1, it'll be maintained at $1 per man per month contribution, $73,000. And you can see the ending balances still remaining the same. And the lowest year, again, 2023, $282,000, just above the threshold of $280,000, but it is above that, and it continues to grow from there. So on the next slide, you'll see what that looks like as far as reserve balances over a threshold. All right, so one more slide. Those are what the contractor reserve specialist has showed. And the next portion of my presentation, if you want me to go through, I certainly can. I just have a list of what expenditures are to come out of the replacement fund. These are all items that we've reviewed line by line in previous meetings, and there haven't been any significant changes. If you want, I can fly through them, or, all right, we'll move quickly. All right, building numbers here. So these are all items that are said to be funded from the reserve fund. And these are the items that are going to take place in 2022. Building numbers, you can see that there is no expenditures planned for 2022. This was moved to the paint program as staff replaces buildings. In building structures, this is $2.5 million expenditure, and it's a decrease of $1 million. And historicals have been lower than anticipated for building structures for 2022, and the 2022 budget was adjusted. You can see the history there. We're not spending as much as we were budgeting, so we dropped that budget down to $2.5 million. Electrical systems decreased by $29,000, and this is to address electrical panel maintenance and a contingency for panel failures. The budget for the electrical systems were reduced to offset insurance costs, so you can see a reduction there of $29,000. Energy projects, there was no changes for energy projects. There's nothing planned at this time for 2021 or 2022. Exterior lighting has decreased $50,000, and this funding provides for potential lighting upgrades throughout the community and the related annual operation and maintenance costs. The budget was reduced here based on the board's direction to help offset insurance costs. And I must say, the board did meet together, and we went through a laundry list of the items that were potential reduction. We did engage our M&C director at the time, and he gave us a list of possible reductions, and that would be least intrusive to the residents. So this is a reflection upon that.
I just want to say, make it easier, Jose, all of these reductions that we're going to talk about over the next minute or two are all related to trying to offset the cost of insurance. I mean, it's just that simple. I don't think you need to go into an explanation for each one of them. That's why all of them are here. You're correct, the board did meet. We did ask the head of maintenance and construction, the head of recreation, the head of landscaping, the head of general services to submit to us lists of where they could cut programs that would not impact the infrastructure of Third Mutual and also would not result in any layoff of staff. So those were the two criteria that we established for the directors. Each of them came in. We then asked them to prioritize those lists. We then reviewed each of those lists and as a board made decisions about what percentage, if any, of those items on the list we felt we could reduce or cut. And some of that money was from operating, very little of it. A lot of it was from reserve. And all of these items that are listed here that are showing decreases are all part of that overall plan that the board engaged in to help offset cost of insurance.
Well said, thank you.
So I think just to help move this along, rather than go item by item, unless people have specific question about a specific item on the list, I don't think there's a need for you to go over each and every item.
Great, in that case, we'll show this up here for a few seconds here if there's any questions. If not, we'll move to the next screen. If nothing jumps out to anyone here, we'll move on to the final screen for M&C. Big items here, the waistline remediation project, $300,000. So total reductions year over year for M&C ended up being just shy of $2 million, going from 10.7 to 8.8. You can see there. On the next slide, you'll see something similar for general services. They only have 3 items here. And you can see the total reduction there is a $38,000 reduction. Next slide here is for landscape. And landscape did have a couple of increases, and they had to do with a lot of this work having to be done by in-house staff, and they were affected by the union wage increases. All right, on the next slide here, so that was reserve contributions. We'll talk about some of the restricted contributions. Total decrease here of $11.61. For the disaster fund, honestly, we wanted to keep this disaster fund the same. However, due to the statutory maximum increases of $93. We had to reduce this down by $264,000. Just a little bit about the disaster fund. This is really your emergency fund, if you will. The purpose of it is to repair or replace mutual assessments damaged by uninsured or unexpected disasters. It's also for providing certain insurance premiums as directed by the board. Just to give everyone a sense of understanding here, this is a fund that's not required by civil code, and it's not required in your reserve calculations. So earlier we talked about how you're 37% funded, but that doesn't include any of these monies. These monies are available to you should you need them, so you're really funded a little bit better than that. But ultimately, we had to reduce this contribution to stay within the $93 maximum charge. The unappropriated expenditures fund also is not required by civil code, and we eliminated that contribution entirely, going from $586,000 to no contribution. So let's take a look on the next slide here what that means for you as far as from a cash flows perspective. The contribution went from $25 to $21.39. You can see what it's doing to your fund. Fortunately, we don't have that many planned expenditures from this fund, so we do actually anticipate the disaster fund growing for 2021 and continuing to grow as we ramp back up to the $25 contribution rate. And you can see what's going on with those. Historically, we've been using $1.5 million. However, when it rains a lot and there's a lot of leaks, we've had quite a bit more expenditures coming out of there per year. But I wanted to give you that information. On the next slide here, this is what's planned to come out of this fund, and it's just, again, having to do with moisture intrusion leaks. And this is something that used to be paid for entirely from the disaster fund, moisture intrusion leaks, but now it's what goes on. There's two parts of moisture intrusion. One is the cleanup portion, right? So when there is an unexpected flood, you have to clean up all the water and make sure to get it all mopped up. All that is funded here from the disaster fund. But in addition to that, you have to get to the source of the problem, typically plumbing. And when they go in and they have to redo pipes or get into the walls or anything like that, all that construction portion is funded from the replacement fund, since it's going to be extending the life of those pipes. So what you see here, the 2021 plan, is really a contingency just based on some of the history, some of the moisture intrusion issues that we've experienced. But this is the cleanup portion. $925,000 is budgeted for that. Additionally, out of the disaster fund, we do fund some fire risk management, and this is where they go up into the slopes and just clear away some of that brush to make sure to mitigate as much as we can any of the fire risks from the neighboring wilderness areas, for lack of a better word. It was $180,000 in 2021, and it's projected to remain so for 2022. And insurance premiums, no, we're not planning on having any insurance premiums to be paid for the disaster fund in 2022, but just wanted to show you some history here as what has happened. In 2020, we paid $918,000, and the plan for 2021 was 2.1, but as Robert mentioned, it was actually closer to a 3 due to a supplemental appropriation. And for the unappropriated expenditures fund, here again is that same cash flow projection. You'll see in 2022, this contribution has gone down to 0. Nevertheless, your ending balances are hopefully going to continue to go up. We anticipate expenditures of about $400,000. As I looked at the history here, this fund has historically been used for the solar project, for trash chute repairs, and even for fire risk reduction. But overall, we don't anticipate, we anticipate $400,000 to come out of this fund in 2022 for unknown expenditures. It's just a contingency budget at this time. Further, I wanted to show the board a little glimpse at the Garden Villa Rec Room Fund. The Garden Villa Rec Room Fund is budgeted to go up by 25 cents to those that participate. This is a surcharge, so not everyone pays into it, but those members that have access to the Garden Villa Rec Rooms do. It's $6 per member per month, and you can see the cash flow here as well, ending at about $120,000 on the year. Also, this fund is not required by civil code. I just want to get that out there. It's just something that's obviously nice to have for those garden villa rec rooms. And here's the same information here. The 2022 plan is to be spend $73,000 on improving the garden villa rec room fund. And that's pretty consistent with what's been done historically. And that concludes the presentation that we have here today for third. And I'll be happy to.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a lot of time and effort put into that. Chris, do we have any questions from anyone? Did you see?
There are no questions. I have not
Okay.
seen anything in the
Any
chat
from
or
the board?
any hands raised or anything like that. Lynn, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or turn on your mic, but as far as I can see, you haven't put anything in the chat, and there are no member comments in the chat as well.
Okay, if there are
No
no other,
question.
what's that?
No question, she said.
Oh, okay. If there are no other questions, we'll go ahead with director's comments. Item 10, start with Reza.
No comment. The only thing that I was gonna just bring up is the insurance issue. That as far as this board concerned, I think, we are not done with the insurance. We haven't washed our hand and said, this is it. We are still working with the insurance companies to see what we can get as the best. Also, I had several comments from the members that they said we should try again. I told them, I guess, until January, I guess we have to get our ducks in a row as a board. And then maybe in January, February, March, we try again and see if our members gonna cooperate more and help us to resolve this issue. But, right now, we are, the only option that we have is working with the insurance companies and see if we can get a better deal and reduce our cost. Other than that, we're gonna talk to our member coming next year when these things are in effect. And if they have the apathy to help, then the board will consider that. And there is a lot of comments out there about insurance and what we are doing about it. And as I said, this board hasn't washed sand off of it yet, and we are still working on it, making sure that we get the best available deal for the members. That's
Okay.
my comment.
John?
No, thank you.
Ralph?
No comment, thank you.
Robert?
I'll just speak to the issue of insurance. One of the things we're trying to do at this point is we have changed the renewal date. We have shifted from an October 1 renewal date. All the policies that we are renewing are being renewed until June 1st of 2022. So we will go back into the market to renew those policies in May of next year. So depending upon where we are with the ballot, if we do another ballot, and what kinds of things we can go to market, we're going to be in a position to have a better situation come June 1 of next year, assuming that if there is a ballot, that happens.
Okay, Annie?
Good meeting, good presentation, thank you.
Okay. Craig?
No comment, thank you.
Donna?
No comment, thank you, but thank you to Jose for an excellent presentation on a very complicated topic representing hours and hours of work, both from the finance people, the departments, and the board. So thank
Okay.
you all.
Does Lynn have any parting questions? Chris?
I think it was great. I really appreciate all the work that finance has put into this, Jose and Steve, and thank you so much. I think the board did a really good job of working with finance on all, it's complicated. I know it's very complicated, especially the insurance issue, but thanks everybody for all that you've done.
Okay, Kush?
Thank you, Steve. I don't have any comment right now, but I want to thank the staff for all the hard work that they put to get this together and the dedication that they have. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, parting comments?
Other than thank you, as board members who have been very active and participatory with our great staff, Jose and Steve and the finance team, and all of the departments that put their budgets together. We worked with you really, really well this year and had very difficult scenario with regards to the insurance, and we know that. But thank you for your efforts as well. And obviously, thank you to my staff. They did a wonderful job.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to echo Jeff's comments and thank the board for being so involved and to working with us and challenging us and making sure that we're getting you the best product that you possibly can. And if the board will allow me, I'd also like to take a minute to thank my staff. Linda Shepard and Richu Sadju and Ada Montesinos, they are the ones that have done the lion's share of all this work, and they're the ones that are really doing the work, if you will. So a big thank you to them. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
No comment, thank you.
Okay. I'd like to tag on to what Jeff mentioned there about all the hard work that went into it. Just from the board standpoint, each board member spent hundreds of hours over the last 2 years just on insurance alone. If you consider the number of meetings we've had, the research that's been done, the thinking process through all of this has been tremendous. It's been a big learning curve that all of us have had to work together on. And then when you couple it with the hours that staff has put on it, you're up into thousands of hours. So I want to be sure that people understand that. And it's not an easy subject. And like Reza said, we aren't done yet. So there's more to come on insurance as well as other things. So thanks to all who participated in this. Thank you for the presentation today. And at this time, if there are no objections, I'll adjourn the meeting.
I'm sorry, what?